a ke le bone ke tsela e di-lawyera di fang moatlhodi tlhompho ka yone di a emelela go bontsha tlhompho a kere ke ga ona ntho e le gapeletsang ba re etsa jwalo rona baatlhodi le baemedi. Well, we're going to start, shall we? Ramsenoch, you're still under the oath to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Okay.
And we're now going to proceed. Counsel, you may continue to lead the witness.
Thank you, Justice. Mr. Mosenochi, you were the project manager of the Gauteng Mental Health Marathon Project.
Yes.
Can you then proceed to explain what was to be achieved through the project?
The key goal was to, because of the termination notice that has been given to Life Esidimeni, it was to ensure that the patients who are chronic patients who are in Life Esidimeni are catered for. Those who need to be at our facilities, they are taken back to our facilities. Those who are liable for discharge are discharged, and those who need to go to NGOs are taken to NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Those are that was the main task, but also to ensure that the facilities are ready for that. First of all, that our institutions, hospitals, are able to accommodate those who need to go to the institutions. So we needed to ensure that we have space. We also needed to work with NGOs to be able to accommodate additional patients within their facilities. Basically because we had a working partnership with the NGOs. I think that time, more or less about 4,000 other patients were accommodated in the NGOs. So it was not a new thing in terms of NGOs.
And can you then proceed to give an elaboration of how this project was then carried out?
Yes. Firstly, after having the project team signed, people agreed to serve on the project team. As a project manager, I did call the first meeting where people were briefed. But before that, there were issues that were, because I took, in November and December, there were issues that were raised by stakeholders who were complaining that this issue of shifting patients from Life Esidimeni is going to be problematic. So I think the first meeting that was contentious was with the stakeholders. Stakeholders are SADC, Section 27, and all those organizations which proposed to represent the clients, the representatives of the clients. So what we have done under the leadership of the HOD, we had to meet with them because—
What do you mean clients? Representatives of clients?
Mental health care users and their representatives. So that was the first meeting that I think that's one meeting that I attended where we met with the stakeholders under the chairmanship of the HOD. But also what I did myself before I took over the work, I did visit the facilities. Ramfontein is a complex, so I did visit together with the team of mental health unit on individual basis so that I'm able to know what is involved. I did go to Baneng, I did go to Wavali. The second visit was with the leadership of the department.
Mr. Msonogi, if I can just take you back with regard to the first meeting which you have had. You have just mentioned that you had meetings with stakeholders which included organizations which were representing the mental health care users.
Yes.
What was the situation with the family members of the users? What was your engagement?
We had, what has happened is that in terms of the engagement with the family members, in our visit with the leadership of the department to meet with family representatives in the different facilities, we did engage them in Wavali in Jamestown, where the MEC was part of the delegation that engaged them. We also did do the same in Ramfontein. Unfortunately, the MEC could not attend there, but we did.
What kind of institution is Waverley?
Waverley is a care center. It's a Life Esidimeni care center that had our patients also, that chronic patients admitted there and taken care of there. Equally, Ramfontein is the same Life Care Esidimeni center that took care of our patients. So we did go there under the leadership of my executive.
Same as Baneng.
And then Baneng is one different one because I ended up having to go there alone with the team because both the HOD and the MEC were not available there. So I had to lead the team there. And Baneng was more unique because it is more of intellectually disabled children who most of the time are. So in my round there, I went even to see where they sleep, how they are being treated, and all those things. So it really had an impact in my observation in terms of how vulnerable they were. So basically, we did visit all the facilities and the relatives.
And was the plan also to move these children from Baneng?
That was initially part of the plan.
It was part of the marathon project to move these vulnerable children, mentally disabled, from Baneng to where?
That was the
plan. Where were they supposed to go?
That was the original plan. We needed to identify where they are going to be able to be taken to. And so in the process...
According to the plan, where were they to be taken to?
The project had to identify the beds wherever they can be identified, either at Kalinen or other NGOs. And we only discovered that the NGO that could take patients like that will be Takalani, which is in Soweto next in Deep Kloof. But because of my visit and the impact that it had on me, I tried to avoid taking.
Why was it necessary to move these children? In your understanding of the plan,
Your Honor, it was the termination of our association with Life Esidimeni included all the 3 facilities. The other one is Ramfante, is a complex, it's 2 facilities in one. That's why I'm saying 3. So it included all those, because the contract was bounded together. It was one contract.
Well,
So
let's take one step back.
Yeah.
Why was the contract cancelled in relation to Baneng?
the termination of the contract included Baneng, basically because it was a contract that affected the whole of Life Esidimeni. So it needed either
Okay, let's take a step back. You are the project manager.
Yes.
Excuse me, why was the contract of Life Esidimeni cancelled? We know now that it included Randfontein, Waverley, and Baneng.
Yes.
Why was that contract cancelled?
In terms of the termination letter that was sent to Baneng, the issue that was raised and was the issue of cost containment, I think, budget constraints, and also the issue of the AG issues in terms of having only renewing one contract with one provider all the time for many years.
What is
I think
AG?
those were the
AG
argument.
issues? You mean what? Auditor General issues?
The
What
Auditor
is-
General inquiries, I think, yeah. So basically those were the issues that were raised, and the same as when I spoke of Life SABC Park, it was the same thing of
Okay, let's summarize it again. You say it was cost containment.
Yes,
That was the one reason for not renewing
the contract.
the contract. And the
Yes.
second reason was?
The processes in terms of not one provider always having the contract, which was Life Esidimeni, and not putting it to tender, which is a normal approach to this kind of contract.
And by the time the contract was cancelled, had the services been put to tender?
No. The plan was that we must use our facilities and also the NGOs that are available. So basically that was the issue, and that's why the project has many projects inside it. We had to add the infrastructure project, which was to renovate the facilities where we can be able to take our patients to. It was run by the infrastructure together with assisted and supported by DID, Public Works. And also the HR, because the other issue that was of my concern and other departmental concern was the staff that was taking care of the patients, especially the care workers and the professional nurses. So we needed to see whether we can absorb them into our facilities. And also the issue, finance was assisting us.
But were they not employed by Life Esidimeni?
They were employed by Life Esidimeni, my honor, but once there's termination of contract, it means the implication was that Life was going to close those facilities because it was the sole mandate. They were taking care of the patients.
So as you move the patients, you actually also
affected the staff.
destroyed the jobs which were at Life Esidimeni.
Yes. that was the case. So basically, it was a mammoth of a task. It was a
And did the
difficult
people
task.
who worked at Life Esidimeni, as the contract ended, were they absorbed into other employment opportunities?
They were retrenched, and we looked for spaces for them through the HR team. We looked for spaces for them in various facilities, Vescopis, Sterfontein, Kalinen.
How many people were retrenched?
I won't have that number, but mainly those who were catered for were nurses, because we needed nurses. I think mainly those are the ones who were catered for.
No, but how many were retrenched? You are the project leader.
Am I allowed to open?
Yes, you are allowed.
Okay. My Honor, it affected 700 healthcare workers, my estimate. Those who are directly healthcare workers.
And those are the ones by affected, you mean those who were retrenched, who lost their jobs?
I mean those who were working there, who are going to be retrenched. If
700.
yeah, it affected 700 workers.
And how many did you help place in other jobs?
Okay, let me check. What we did, we established the profile first through the HR task team, where we identified the professionals and the administrative staff that needed to be looked at. And what we did, we asked the facilities, Vescopis, Sterfontein, and Kalinen, to identify their needs and give us their needs, which they did in terms of that. And then we did request finance to assist us in terms of that. And then we did the process of making sure that those that are able to be accommodated.
Ramusenoch, the question was quite short and pointed, really.
Yeah, I don't have...
On your plan and your project, you would have moved patients and you would have had 700 people retrenched on your evidence. So the question really was, did you help any people to find other jobs?
Yeah. We did accommodate others, but I don't have the exact figures.
You don't know how many?
I'll have to, I know, but I have to look for it.
Okay.
If you can give me time.
Yeah, we'll give you an adjournment at some time to look at it. Just
Yeah,
keep
the
it in
numbers.
mind.
Okay.
There's no problem. Keep it in mind, look at your papers, and come back to us.
Okay.
Okay. Council, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Msenogi. Can you then proceed to explain how were these transfers were conducted and to which institutions?
Hello? Yeah, the transfer of the patients.
Yes.
Yeah. They were transferred to our public institutions, those who needed to be transferred there. What has happened is that we had profiled them, the clinical team and mental health unit had profiled the patient in terms of their chronic state and in terms of the diagnosis, in terms of which ones are all the disease profile in terms of their abilities. So those who needed to go back to hospitals were taken to hospitals, to Vescopis, to Sterfontein, and to Cullinan.
Did you have categories of patients who were to be transferred to different institutions?
Yes, we did. If you look at the first inception report that I presented at the executive, it had outlined the profiling in terms of which patients are having what diseases, so categories of diseases.
Can you then proceed to give an indication of the categories of those patients and where were they transferred to?
It's contained in under the what happened. If you look at the document on the mental health care users, it specified which patients were what kind of disease and which were at which facilities. So we were able to move them according to the NGOs that are suitable.
Where can we find the document, Council? Where in the record?
Can you check file number 8, volume 8?
File number 8. Okay.
Turn to page 2854.
Yes. That was the profiling in terms of life Esidimeni, what they were having. This is the profiling in terms of the ages where they stayed at the facility, from 10 years downwards to 1 year. And some of them were categorized according to those who have IDs and those who don't have IDs. And then on page 2855, it was the diagnosis in terms of the mental care user diagnosis. So basically, that's what we depended upon to categorize the patients, which this work was done by the clinical team plus the mental health care unit, which basically were more technically able to attend to this work. So I will not be able to give much more elaborate in terms of information, but the mental health care team will be able to do that.
But how were these categories used to identify who should be transferred and who not?
Your Honor, in terms of the NGOs, there were NGOs in terms of their expertise. There were those NGOs who were only looking after children and what they call intellectually disabled children. There were those NGOs who were able to look for the frail care.
No, my question is this. If one looks at page 2854,
yes.
Now you know that there were people who were 10 years and more at life Esidimeni,
Yes,
and there were 532 in number.
yes.
What would you do with that statistic? How would it help you decide what?
This statistics was assisting the team to, because some people were not really being, they have been there for a long time and lost contact with their families. So it assisted us in terms of tracing their families, to be able to make contact with their families, to be informed of the anticipated closure of the facilities.
Or look at page 2855.
Yes.
How would that help you to decide who goes to your public facilities and who would have to be discharged to their homes and who would be moved to NGOs?
Your Honor, this 2855, if I recollect well, it was going to assist us in terms of determining which NGOs can take care of this kind of chronic patient. All of these patients were chronic patients who were stabilized. And then this was going to assist us to identify the NGOs that are capable of taking care of this family, of these patients. But also, this profiling was assisting us in terms of the clinical team and the mental health care unit team to identify which ones are going to go back to the hospitals. So basically, that's the work that mental health care unit and the clinical team was supposed to assist us with.
Thank you, Council.
Mr. Msenekhu, were you able to successfully implement the project? Or if there were challenges, what were the challenges in the implementation of the project?
The project in earnest started in January, and it was too short a time. I realized that it's too short a time. End of March, we needed to have vacated the facilities. And as we interacted with life and also interacted with the NGOs and getting the reports from the different task teams, I thought that it's a tall order. And I raised the issues with the executive in terms of that it's a short space of time. I don't think we'll be able to.
When you refer to the executive, who did you engage in particular?
My HOD, Dr. Banisi Levalo. But when I panicked and I discovered that I'm going to fail as a project manager to have moved patients, and Life Esidimeni was insisting that it has to give retrenchment notices to the employees and they have to do it on time according to labor regulations. So it just gave me sleepless nights. And I decided ultimately.
Why didn't you say we are not ready, extend the contract for a year, keep the people and let them keep their jobs, and the day when we're ready, we will come back?
Justice, I've done that. I did raise that, and I did propose an alternative.
Can you be more specific? You raised
Yeah.
it with whom?
I raised it first with my HOD and my team. Then eventually I raised it with the MEC. That evidence I did submit to the ombudsperson, where I outlined that these people are vulnerable and we may not be able to meet the deadline. Can we get an extension? I requested 6 months or a year, because I was proposing that maybe it should be on a phased approach rather than the way we are doing it. And I also provided an alternative proposal that why can't we buy Banning itself and also maybe procure one of the facilities, either River Valley or the Ramfontein complex.
How many young people were at Banning?
There were, at that time, there were, I think there were 295. So that one, I wanted it not to be removed because I really feared for the West in terms of Banning.
And why didn't it happen? Why did your
I
fear not be accommodated?
I did get a concession, my honor. I did get a concession from MEC and the leadership in terms of they did agree that in principle we must get an extension for Banning, we must extend the contract for at least 1 year, which I was happy with that because then I knew that at least I won't bother with Banning. And then for the other 2 facilities, instead of getting the 6 months that I requested or to a year that I requested, I was given an extra 3 months.
3 months to June.
Meaning that from instead of March, it will be the end of June.
But why? What was the urgency about?
I think the urgency is that from my side, in my opinion, it was because they had already returned to life and terminated the contract. And we will not have space for these patients if we don't do the project that I was doing. I can't explain the urgency in terms of why did we have to close the Life Esidimeni facilities.
But you were the leader. You were the person. You were the one who was meant to have insight into the project, who reports to your seniors and direct your juniors, right?
Yes.
That's what a leader does.
Yes.
Why don't you know what was the reason for the urgency?
In my opinion, there was no urgency. There was no urgency. The only issue was that the policy decision has already been taken and it was being implemented.
Okay, Counsel?
Can you then proceed to elaborate on the ultimate outcome of the implementation of that project? What eventually occurred?
Ultimately, what had occurred, it was in terms of the infrastructure part of the project. There were spaces available at the required spaces, that the facilities that were being renovated. And then also there were identified spaces at the NGOs. And also some families also decided to take their patients home rather than be on a discharged basis. So at the end of the June, most of the patients have been moved to the facilities that were designated.
Was it all of the patients relocated to those facilities?
I can say yes, because after June, there were no patients in the facilities, in the life Esidimeni facilities.
Mr. Mosenogi, you will recall that the report by the Ombudsman was in relation to the deaths which occurred.
Yes.
Can you just elaborate on your knowledge of what ultimately led to those deaths?
After the project after patient has been moved to various facilities, we began to experience that there are problems and there are challenges. And at that time, there was not a very, we were all stressed in the department because there were problems all over. The first challenge was I think where we went wrong was the issue of payment of subsidies to the NGOs was not well done. Most of the NGOs were not given the subsidies that they were supposed to do, so that they are able to take.
Why? Why would you send people out of a healthcare place like Life Esidimeni, take them to NGOs? I'm sure you'll be asked questions about how you selected the NGOs.
Yes.
And not give them money. 3 to 4 months. You have to explain that, surely.
That
was your project, and how did that happen?
There were, I think, procedural issues that I think maybe the project we did overlook, where people needed to have, especially the new NGOs, needed to have contracts.
We have to listen to Mr. Mosenogi, right? I know you don't agree with everything he says, but we have to give him the respect and listen and not heckle him, please. Thanks.
There were processes that were needed to be completed before subsidies can be transferred to individual NGOs, and I think we lacked in that respect.
Yes, what processes were those? Just help me understand.
Paper processes where the service level agreement needs to be signed, accounts need, the NGOs needed to have accounts, bank accounts and all those things, and also our financial people needed to be up to speed with transferring of funds. And I think maybe that's where the problem was.
But why did you move the people before the systems were in place?
That's why we really ran short. I think it was our weaknesses, Judge.
Yes, but why was that weakness there? I'm just, we have a very serious situation here, and the consequences you know.
Yes.
So we're trying to, and the family members who are here, they're trying to get at it to understand how it happened. That's why we're doing this.
Yes.
And remember, we know a lot about what you said to the Ombud.
Yes.
It's on paper, it's written down. I've certainly read most of it, if not all of it.
Yes.
But I wanted to get behind your mere say-so to understand. Hence my questions, what was the agency about? Why would you cancel the agreement in any event? Why would you move people before the money, the processes for paying money are in place? What was the big pressure on you to do what you did?
As
You project manager, let's keep it there for a moment.
okay.
Why did you do what you did, acting as a public official?
I think, Judge, as a person, as a person, and as a project manager, I don't have an excuse why we had to hurry it the way it is, because my initial thought was that it should be done in phases, but the time frames I negotiated, and those were the time frames I was given, and I did not realize that will be
Time
having-
frames given to you by whom?
by the leadership of the department.
Who in the leadership?
The executive, the HOD and the MEC,
What is the name of the HOD?
Dr. Silebano and Ms. Kadani Mahlangu.
So you're acting on their instructions.
Yes, that was it was the policy decision.
Counsel?
In terms of the report by the Ombud, it is recorded that there is a number of 118 patients who died pursuant to the implementation of the project. Can you just assist this hearing as to at what stage did you start to learn of the occurrence of these deaths?
I might not have an exact date, but I think soon after, I think either in July or August, there was, and I think at that time, that's when we started having reports in terms of patients have died in this and that NGO. And most of the time then, the people who were asked questions were the mental health unit. So I was basically a little bit out of, I don't know whether it was deliberate or what, but I was out of the picture. Most of the time the issues were raised with Dr. Manemela and her team, who were continuing to work because it was their job. But I did get information when 36 patients were being reported on. I think we were called by the Premier to account. And we did, through the MEC, led by the MEC, went to the Premier's office to give account of what has happened.
What account was given to the Premier?
The mental health care unit had prepared a presentation that was read by the MEC that details the issues in terms of the deaths of people. At that time, it was reported in the newspapers that it was 36. But I did get a briefing from the mental health unit that it seems it's increasing. And I did raise it in the previous meeting when I was asked my view, because I was not even introduced as a project manager. So I understood that maybe it means my job, my work is finished. So I was just introduced as a chief director planning at the Premier's office. So I did try to point out that it seems the patients are increasing in terms of the reported death. But it was pointed out that maybe the mental health unit has made a mistake. It's still 36. That's where after that...
I think you'll have to speak louder so
Okay.
we can hear you.
Yeah.
I know you're answering questions to your counsel, but you're really talking to all of us.
To all of you.
Starting with me, yes.
Okay. I was saying that when I was aware that the report came saying that 36 people have died from the media and other, I did get in touch with the mental health unit, and in there, because they were asked to prepare a report for the Premier, which we went to present to the Premier. And at that particular time, I was not identified as the project manager. I was just identified as a chief director planning.
Do you know why the reports of death came from the media and not detected by your project?
Even the project, I think to be honest, Judge, after the project has been finalized, I think I was not really considered to be. I think maybe it was because the project has finished. So most of the work was now being done by mental health unit. So
at what point was the project finished? When what had happened? We'll get to the time in a moment. How and when did the project come to an end?
The project was supposed to end after April, after June. That was the shifting of patients from to the NGOs and to other facilities. But we needed to have a month to make sure that everything is well in terms of the facilities that we have moved patients to. But while I was still...
The question was, when did the project end?
I don't think it ended that time, because then when it was supposed to end, the patient started to die. So the expected end then had to continue, because we needed to deal with the aftermath of the tragedy. So it did not really have an end point the way we anticipated.
Thank you, Mr. Senori. There are no further questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Counsel. Naturally, I have to ask all of the other counsel whether you're ready with cross-examination. And if you are, again, I'll start with section 27. And that I do because of the number of deceased people you represent. And so I'm going to start again with section 27 with cross-examination. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Justice Moseneke. I might be a little bit disjointed this time as I find my record and so on, but I am ready to proceed.
Thank you. Are you ready to proceed? Okay,
I'm ready to proceed.
you are ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge.
You're ready to proceed. Very well. Let's go for it then. Advocate Arson.
Thank you. Mr. Moseneke, thank you for being here today. And thank you for subjecting yourself to questions from the various parties present. My name's Adila Hassam, and I represent the families of 55 people who died during the project, the period of the project. So if I may start with your appointment to lead this project. You say you were appointed to lead the project on 5 November 2015. By which time, if you could just clarify for me, the contract had been terminated already.
Yes, on the November the 5th, that was in a meeting of the performance quarterly review. I was proposed by the MEC that I must assist with the project of Life Esidimeni. Before that, I was involved in another project, so I was not involved with Life Esidimeni.
Yes, but can you confirm that at the point on which you began to lead the team, the contract had already been terminated?
Yes, it was already terminated. It was terminated at the end of September. Actually, not terminated. The notice has been given at the end of September.
Notice of termination, which meant that by March 2016, all of the patients would have had, a place for all of the patients had to be found.
Yes.
Meaning once the notice was sent in October 2015, the train had now left the station.
Yes, that was true.
So when you were appointed, you were not appointed at the beginning of this project. When earlier decisions, there were obviously earlier decisions. The record shows in March 2015,
yes,
the MEC had already indicated her intentions.
Yes.
You say that there were fortnightly progress reports that were provided during your management of the team. Do you have these progress reports? Were they provided regularly on a fortnightly basis?
The intention was to provide them on a fortnightly basis. And from my perspective, most of the time they were provided. It was senior management meeting where the MEC was the chair, and the first report was provided there in terms of what we are doing, which is entitled the conception of the project, the way I understood it, the way I tried to modify what I found as a project plan. So I did present in terms of what is there, the state of the issue, and all the things that needed to be done.
Were you satisfied then with those fortnightly progress reports, such as they were? Were you, I mean, that surely was your measure of whether things were on track. Were you satisfied?
What I did try to do and to present on an honest basis was I had drafted, I'm sure if we can look at one of the presentations, I had drafted sort of a format of reporting that will details will show where we are at that particular time, and then the next report will detail how far have we moved from where we are. So we used basically the same format in terms of presenting to the MEC. There were discussions which are covered in the minutes, and progress was registered. Where there were no progress, we pointed out the challenges and where there are problems.
If you could just repeat for us, I know you touched on it in your evidence in chief. When did you become aware that there was a problem? That you weren't going to meet this deadline?
The first time when I was aware, I think it was when I was supposed to give the next report. I think it was the 12th of February. The 12th of February. The first time it was in January after I visited the area, and we've spoken to the families in various facilities, and they raised a lot of objections which were making sense to me. And we did talk. That's where I developed the idea that maybe we need to have an alternative to what we are doing.
So when was that? At which meeting was that? Where the concerns were raised?
The concerns were raised at Wevalu when we were together with the MSC in Germiston, and then the other concerns, it was different. The Randfontein people also did raise issues.
What date, or roughly what date?
It was at the initial period. Maybe I need to. The first one that, I don't know whether it is there in the evidence. On the 20th of January, I did send out an email to my superiors, just pointing out the progress in terms of the report and giving a summary report of developments. And then I did raise some issues in terms of maybe you don't have that.
We don't have it.
Yeah, okay.
Could you make it available to...
That was the initial concerns that I raised after we've met. But on the 12th February, I did raise it on an email to the MEC and the HOD.
Okay.
Which was the annexure to the ombudsman's report, which really highlighted the issues of concern and what we can do to try to address the issues.
So you'd say safely from about January 2016, you registered serious concerns?
Yes, and I developed an idea of an alternative if we can buy these facilities. And actually, we did agree with the HOD that that's the best. And he did ask me to get indicative figures so that we are able to know how much can it cost if we buy either one or two of the facilities.
Thank you. To move on to another topic, yeah. You say that the reason for the termination of the contract, you gave two justifications. The first was budget, resource constraints, and the second was that the Auditor General had raised a concern about the repeated renewal of the contract. Did the Auditor General require you to cancel the contract, or was there any attempt to explain to the Auditor General what the basis was for the repeated renewal of the contract?
I don't think the Auditor General was approached in regard to that. but it was just stated as a fact that they did raise issues in terms of one provider all the time renewing contracts. So, but I'm not privy to the issue whether did they, any one of us raise the issue with the Auditor General in terms of the vulnerability of patients that are taken care of by life, and also because the way it was, in my understanding, they were sole providers for the service. And then the other issue maybe that I need to add, there was, before I think people took a decision, there was a study that was done.
Who are people? Let's just be exact.
The department. Yeah, the department. Before they did, there was a study that was done under the Health Economics Unit, called by the consultants called Health Advance Institute.
Yes.
Who I think basically they were looking at the cost analysis of the contract with Life Esidimeni, and I think they were appointed because people were, Life always wanted to increase the tariffs. So they wanted to see whether, we wanted to see whether is it cost effective, and that contract, that Health Africa, they did provide the information in terms of that.
And did they find that it was cost effective or not?
My understanding was that it was going to be expensive continuing with the contract. It's going to be expensive if we continue with the contract the way we are continuing, because every year Life wanted an increase.
That was the finding of the consultant. Is that what you are saying?
Yes.
That report?
In that document, yeah. If you look at that document.
We've tried to look at that document. We've requested it on several occasions from the department.
Okay.
It hasn't been provided. If you can assist us with that, we'd be very grateful. It's an odd conclusion, because what the record shows is that Life Esidimeni was being paid about 320 rand per person per day.
Yes.
And the cost of accommodating the mental health care users at state facilities, state-run facilities like Westkoppies and Sterkfontein and Cullinan, were more than 1,000 rand in each case.
Yes.
So the idea of moving patients from one facility at the cost of 320 rand per person per day to other state facilities where the cost was about 4 times as much just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think the department was looking at basically utilizing NGOs, because the idea was that most of the patients that are in Life Esidimeni, they are stabilized and they can be able to live in NGOs or at home. They just needed medical, chronic care rather than go to serious facilities. I think that was the argument.
But would you agree that if they were to be moved to an NGO, they would have to be moved to a facility that was capable of providing that chronic care, that was habitable, that respected the dignity of its residents, in which food was available, and in which the staff were capable of providing the services required by the residents?
That was the intention.
And in your view, it was possible to do that at 112 rand per day, per person per day? that was the average cost of the NGOs per person per day.
Basically, I think the intention was that we already had facilities that are providing that care. As I said in the beginning, about 4,000 patients were already accommodated in the NGOs, my estimate. So basically, it was continuing with that, where we have partnership with NGOs who are delivering those services.
Okay, so then let's go there. You say you were just going to continue your partnership with NGOs that were already providing, in the view that you and the department, acceptable services. Correct?
Yeah, we needed to ascertain for ourselves that they are providing those acceptable services.
But would you agree that a number of these NGOs were new NGOs? They didn't exist prior to the decision to terminate the contract. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, in hindsight, I think I agree with that, we ended up even giving patients NGOs that are not experienced to do the work.
And not even licensed properly. Would you agree?
I agree.
But why hindsight?
Your Honor, I was working with people who are experienced technically in terms of the work that the NGOs were doing, and on a regular basis, annually, because the contracts with the NGOs were being renewed on an annual basis. And before they renewed their contract, there was an inspection that they had to do to the NGOs to ensure that they're still delivering quality services. So as a project manager, I assumed that that's the case, that even if they engage additional spaces in those NGOs, people will still look and inspect the way they have done all the time, and
People,
they will be
who
satisfied.
are people? Who are these?
The people.
You have a project and you have people, implementers. We can't talk in such generic terms.
The mental health unit.
Who chose the NGOs?
The mental health unit people. The people who were on an annual basis were working with the NGOs, which is the mental health. There's a mental health directorate in the department, which runs.
Who was the head of the mental health unit?
The director was Dr. Manamela.
Dr. Who Manamela?
Yes. So it was their regular task to take care, to ensure that they work with the NGOs and they make sure that NGOs deliver services. So that was the work that they were doing on an annual basis. On a regular basis, they visited the NGOs.
And what went wrong? If that statement is correct, what went wrong?
I think what went wrong, as an opinion, I might not be an expert on this. What went wrong is that the timelines for the project were just abnormal. We could not do that in the timelines that we were given. I think that's where it went wrong.
At that point, how many years had Life Esidimeni been used for patients? I see some in excess of 10 years. And in evidence, I saw somewhere a number like 30 years. Is that correct? Is that a contract that lasted that?
Yeah, from the briefing that I got, it was that it started in 1979. It was in the National Department of Health that had a relationship, the initial relationship with Life Esidimeni. And then in 1987, the relevant provinces took over.
You were asked by Advocate Hassan why the termination, and you said cost reduction. When she pressed you, you said it was less about costs and more about giving NGOs a stake, a slice of the cake. Did I understand you properly?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
Just,
correct me, put it accurately.
Yeah. When I got into the project, the two issues were the main issues: the cost constraint and also the issue of the Auditor General. And it was...
Then she pressed you.
Life Esidimeni was just one of the other cost containment project. The other one was Selby Park, and then other smaller Yana projects.
Then the advocate asked you questions to show that cost of retaining mental health care user in other state facilities was in excess of 1,000.
Yes.
Do you remember your response to that?
Yes.
Your response was that, yes, but the real thing was giving NGOs an opportunity to look after people.
The NGOs were a cheaper option.
Were a cheaper option.
Yeah, it was not really giving them opportunity because they had already had the opportunity. They were taking care of other patients, chronic mental health care patients. So it was not about giving them an opportunity, but it was expanding the care that they are
Okay, let's get the reason again properly. I followed the cross-examination, but anyway, so your answer is opting for NGOs was a cheaper option.
If patients do not need the care that, if patients just needed a basic care rather than intensive care that is provided for at the hospitals.
To wrap up the point, so why do you say the project was necessary? To find a cheaper option? To terminate Life Esidimeni, which was a repeated contracting party?
In my opinion, it was to cap the escalating expenditure.
To cap escalating expenditure?
Yes.
Council?
Thank you. Mr. Masanoki, you say that it was suitable for patients who just required basic care. But would you agree that many of these patients had suffered from they were mental health care users and suffered from various mental health conditions, including schizophrenia, severe depression, epilepsy, and so on?
Yes, but they were at the chronic stage. They were stabilized. They were stable.
They were stable as a result of the care that they'd been receiving and the adherence to their medication,
Yes.
and to being in an environment in which they were comfortable. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you took the stable patients and placed them in facilities that threatened all of those three conditions to their well-being?
I don't think we can generalize that, because even there were NGOs who are taking care of the chronic patients who are stable. So it's not a matter of taking them from an unstable environment to another, a stable environment to an unstable environment, because, as I said, the NGOs are also taking care of patients, chronic patients, mental health care patients. And there are very good NGOs that are doing that.
At 112 rand per person per day?
The 112 is the addition from their own fundraising. NGOs, the way they operate, they get subsidy from us, but also what they do, they also, from the pension fund, disability pension fund of the users, they also get money from that, and then they also fundraise. So basically it's 3 funding sources. So the most established NGOs are able to sustain themselves, not only by the subsidy, but by other additional funding.
But you say that the subsidies were not paid. Let me just take a step back. The Ombud has told us that NGOs were not given the support that were required. You yourself told us in your evidence in chief that the plan was to assist the NGOs.
Yes.
So they weren't there more or less ready and waiting with some subsidy from government, they would be able to provide these services. They needed more than that.
I agree that there were delays in paying subsidies to the NGOs, and that one I accepted that it was something that we should not have done.
And you're saying they needed no further support than that?
No,
the NGOs?
No, I haven't said they needed not further support.
So they did need further support?
Yes.
And what type of support?
They needed the subsidy in the first place. Also, they needed to be, while waiting for subsidy, maybe they needed support in terms of resources.
Did they also need any support in relation to how to deal with the particular mental health condition of the patients that they would be receiving?
I will imagine so, because especially those who are not experienced.
Did they receive that support?
The mental health care unit tried to give that support. But the pressure of, I think the problem was the many NGOs that were involved at that time. So I think the pressure was that it was too much.
The mental health care unit, are you talking about the directorate that's headed by Dr. Manamela?
Yeah, the departmental unit, yes.
So did Dr. Manamela report to you as she was required to do, as I understand it, in these fortnightly reports, although I would imagine it wouldn't be restricted to that. If things were, if the wheels were coming off, then you wouldn't wait 2 weeks to say so. But did she then inform you of this catastrophe that was about to take place, because it was so overwhelming?
I might not remember clearly, but the challenges were always pointed out. The challenges of patients not having disability. So we tried to engage with SASA, and those who are not having identity documents, we engaged with Home Affairs to try to speed up that, so that patients who are moved to the NGOs, they will be able to reactivate their pension fund. so that the pension also will
Sure.
assist.
Yeah,
the
and I
NGOs.
appreciate that those efforts were made in relation to Home Affairs and processing of SASSA cards, but that wasn't my question. My question was whether Dr. Manamela informed you. As you said, it was not possible to provide these other support services because of the number of NGOs and the need and the speed within which it had to be done. I'm asking whether Dr. Manamela informed you of that, informed you of this.
I think she should have. I'm not in particular remembering whether she has done that, but I think she should have pointed out issues if they were arising. I might not remember particular specific times.
Thank you. I'm going to move on then. I also just want to confirm, just as a follow-up to my question about the AG, the Auditor General, I just want to confirm that there was no open procurement process for the services of the NGOs.
Not the one that I know of, but what happened when I joined, we did have Dr. Manamela and a team had called a meeting just before I began to run the project, I think, in earnest. They did call a meeting of all the NGOs to inform them of the need to have additional beds for life Esidimeni patients. And all the NGOs from all the districts were invited, and I think they had slots to be briefed and also to see whether they can assist the department with additional beds. But the process of procurement of the NGO, it was a yearly event where I don't know whether, I'm not sure, but I think there was an advertisement every year for NGOs to make themselves available to take care of chronic mental health patients. And that was the process that the mental health care unit undertook on an annual basis, and also to look at their reports and to go out and inspect the facilities and to be satisfied, and they will get financial reports and all those things, and then sign on an annual basis. They signed a service level agreement to continue taking care of the patient.
You talk about they should. Did they do that?
My Honor, it was a regular exercise.
No, did they do that in this case?
They've done that.
Of the people who died and reported on by the Ombudsman?
Yes.
Did that happen?
It happened. There was a meeting where all NGOs were called.
I'm not talking about meeting. I'm talking about whether or not they went out to inspect the facilities of the NGOs to see where they are appropriate for the care that might be required by mental care users who you and your unit had ordered should be distributed around various other places.
My Honor, it's a normal process that they have done that.
No, but did the inspection happen?
It did. It's their regular duty.
Where do we see that? Just refer
It's their regular duty.
No, but refer me to minutes. We've been given tons of paper here. Refer me to minutes and things that show. Let me tell you what prompts the question, okay?
Yes.
We've had Professor Malkhapur Makhoba. He's an MBCHB. He is a PhD, Oxford, DPhil, Oxon. He is, name it.
Yes.
He's a member of the Royal College of Surgeons. He's a member of the South African College of Surgeons. He is what could be in the medical field, right? He says to us this morning, if you were referred to any of the NGOs involved here, it would be like being sent to the gallows. And if you went to any of the regular facilities properly resourced and people trained, you could live your full life, even if you have chronic mental health. Is that wrong?
Maybe as an example, I can refer.
Well, I want you to respond to the question I've just put to you. Do you differ from Professor Makoba when he says these NGOs, he went out to interview people who ran them, he went to go and look at the facilities, and he concludes that they amounted to sending people to the death row. In contrast, for instance, to the facility in Pretoria. Do you agree with him about that? Because you want to tell us NGOs have been doing it forever. They're doing it well. Inspections are done routinely, and people die thereafter. So I'd like you to tell you what an expert tells us. We spend a lot of time inspecting the NGOs, looking at the conditions, looking at the resources they have, looking at the level of their training in mental health care, and he concludes that it was, as we say in Pretoria, lewensgevaarlik. It was life-threatening. What do you say to that?
Your Honor, I don't think it's all the NGOs.
We're talking about those who are involved in this project that he studied. Do you disagree with him?
I did go to Takalani in Diepkloof. I did visit it, and it is an existing NGO which had facilities that were acceptable. I did go to Anan in Vereeniging in the Val, and the facilities were acceptable.
And
so my argument is that it's not all the facilities.
Did you go to the NGOs where people died? We have a list of them here. I can read out to you. Did you go to those?
After the death, I did go to. I did go to Precious Angels.
And was it acceptable?
It was not acceptable.
And why do you know it as a matter of hindsight? Why didn't you know it before you sent people there?
As a department, I must say that we made mistakes.
Yeah, that sounds a little better. It really sounds better and not defensive, because we're dealing with people who have actually lost their lives in circumstances where the Ombuds report and your own department tells us the circumstances were unlawful, they were negligent, they were grossly negligent, in fact, in their words. So what is our debate? Is it was all fine, it was all right? What are you telling us?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, tell us what you think it was.
As a project manager, I know that it was an enormous responsibility on my soldiers. And I know that I was not able as an individual to go to all these facilities. That's why I can't say for sure that all these facilities were at the required
Do you
level.
regret that 118 and maybe 129 people died just in this one project?
Yes.
Do you regret that?
My Honor, I do regret that. It should not have happened the way it has happened. And initially, when I took over this job, I had misgivings, but I thought maybe if it's not me, who else can do this? Especially because I myself had a brother who stayed in this kind of facilities for life, and I understood.
But why didn't you tell the MEC and the HOD we are doing the wrong thing. Why didn't you do that?
But I did.
We're in a hurry.
I did raise my concerns.
In relation
And
to Baneng, I understand.
I did try to have another way of looking at it. But sometimes one person gets defeated.
Who defeated?
I won the Baneng issue because I really did maintain my issue that it can't be. And in the end,
you did well there.
I did win concessions on that.
Yes, you did very well there.
I would have liked the other ones to be honor-faced. My best option was to buy the facilities as a backup, because I suspected that, although I didn't anticipate the death, but I knew that we needed a backup. And unfortunately, I was not able to get through to my superiors. Although the HOD did agree with me, but I think both of us were not able to.
Who defeated you? You say we were defeated. Who defeated?
The system.
The system?
Yes.
Okay, let's describe the system a little more.
It was tough, Judge. It was very tough.
You know, we want to hear that. The nation wants to hear what was so tough so that this doesn't happen again.
I did raise issues.
This is not a question of trying to make you look bad, but we want to know so that we should not have 118 people die.
I did raise issues. I also confronted issues. But sometimes I expected other senior managers to assist me, but sometimes I became the lone voice. One time I was asked whether am I a spokesperson of Life Esidimeni. I had to take issue with that.
Yes, the Ombuds does report on that. But you see, I would expect you as a project leader to tell it like it is, to tell us just what happened, so that we can prevent it into the future. And we're not, anyway, Council.
The Ombud, Mr. Masinochi, told us today that as part, in response to a question about whether the government has been implementing his recommendations, that indeed the government has been implementing the recommendations, including the establishment of a team of about 60 people to visit the NGOs to see whether they meet the relevant criteria. And he says not one of them met that criteria. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
I think you've been questioned thoroughly by Justice Masinochi on the NGOs. Follow up to my question. I'm going to move on to a different topic because part of the explanation, and as we have said previously in these proceedings, that explanation and the candidness of the explanation is critical to this process. So again, in an attempt to get to that, to get to the bottom of this, I'd like to pose the following questions to you, and that's in relation to your statement that part of the plan was to move patients to our own facilities, and to renovate wards that were in disuse or old. Is that correct?
Yes.
And were you convinced that renovation would be completed by March 2016 in order to accommodate all of these patients?
As I said, that the infrastructure team had appointed a project manager, and we're working together with DID to renovate the facilities that are needed. I was not convinced on the end of March because a lot of, when they were given reports, they indicated the deadlines and where they can be able to do something. But by the end of June, we had sufficient, I can say sufficient spaces to move patients who needed to be moved to those facilities.
By the end of June?
Yeah, we moved.
2016?
Is it 2016. We moved patients to Vescopis and Sterfontein, where they managed to get some of the facilities renovated, and also Cullinan.
But they were not ready by March. Am I wrong?
They were still in progress.
They were still in progress?
Yes.
Was that a valid concern for the families and the stakeholders that you had met? Was that a valid concern? They raised many concerns. One of them was, how do you expect to have this done in time?
It was a valid concern.
Are you aware of the litigation that took place in December 2015?
The 22nd litigation case.
December 2015.
Yes, the 22nd. I think somewhere between
Yes.
the 22nd and...
Yes.
Yes, because we had an urgent meeting with the concerned stakeholders, Section 27, SADC, and I think Mental Health Federation. We did have a meeting at...
Did you, those concerns that were raised by those stakeholders,
Yes.
that by that point, would you agree that they'd raised it on several occasions and now they were threatening litigation and they brought their attorneys into this? Would you agree?
Yes.
By that point, that's
Yes.
what had happened
They
when you
did
met?
raise those issues, yes.
They raised the issues, but do you agree that those were important, valid and relevant concerns?
Yes, that's why I think the meeting concluded that we must work with them. That's why
So-
on a continual basis there was a stakeholder meeting, which was supposed to be
Yes.
chaired by the HOD, Dr. Silvano, and we had meetings with them and the representatives from those structures. And we tried to work with them.
I hear
on
that.
an amicable basis, yes.
That might have been your intention, but what I'm going to put to you is that there was never any intention to cooperate with the stakeholders, and that in fact they were just seen as an impediment to the full speed implementation of the project. That's what I'm going to put to you, but I'd like to tell you why first. One of the response from the attorneys for the department in relation to that December 2015 litigation. The letter is to be found, the letter from the attorneys is to be found at page 613 of the record. In that letter,
6-1?
613,
Which one is
I suppose that would be, I'm not sure actually,
Two.
the same one? 5-2. Page?
613.
Six, 1-2.
613.
Yeah, okay.
Do you see the letter? It's dated 14 December 2015. And the letter does several things. One thing it does in paragraph 3 is to say that it says, our clients wish to record their sense of, I don't know how to pronounce this word, dubiety, their doubt, basically, to our locus standi, to the locus standi of the stakeholders.
Sorry, where?
Paragraph 3 on page 613. 3. Yes.
Okay.
Do you see it?
Yeah. Yes, sense of, yes.
And then if you turn over the page on paragraph 5, have you found it?
Yes.
Can you read what it says on paragraph 5?
Our clients have taken all reasonable steps in keeping with the various legislative prescripts of the Act to effectively provide both for the discharge and the transfer of the users. Any allegation to the contrary is either self-serving or disingenuous.
So you were the head of the project at the time.
Yes.
And your lawyer was saying you've taken all steps, reasonable steps, to comply with the law and to make sure that the discharge and transfer of users would be effectively conducted, and that the allegations by the stakeholders is self-serving or disingenuous. It also says in paragraph 6, our clients have consulted all the health services to which users have either been discharged and or transferred to. Paragraph 8, it says, the purported, and it quotes, proposed way forward is as untenable as it is unreasonable. The proposed way forward there, as I understand, by the stakeholders, by their legal representatives, Section 27, was to have a curator ad litem appointed. Do you agree that that was an unreasonable proposal in the circumstances?
At the moment, I don't think it was unreasonable.
It goes on to say, our instructions are that your client's insistence on the suspension of the discharges are reckless and a demonstration of selective morality. It's a very strange letter. It's a very angry letter. And so it's part of trying to understand why it is that the department so vigorously was so intent that it wouldn't engage with the stakeholders who were raising very, very serious concerns. And if in the court papers, I want to make my point fully. So bear with me. This is about, it's not just about you. It's about other officials, but you were the head of the project at the time these papers were drawn. So I think it's appropriate if you could assist us to understand it. In the papers, in this litigation, at paragraph, okay, so you're going to need to look at page 112 of the record, which will be file 1.
That's file 1.
112. Have you found it?
Yes.
Okay, so at 112, paragraph 43, The affidavit reads as follows. The representatives from the department requested that SADAG, that's the Depression and Anxiety Group, one of the stakeholders you had met with, the representatives of the department requested that SADAG puts its questions in writing, which it did in a letter dated 26 November 2015, and which it attached to these papers. The letter records a number of concerns about the closure of Life Esidimeni and the discharge of users to other facilities. And indeed, if you were to return to Annexure CC7, all of the concerns and detail are listed there. But at paragraph 44, it continues, SADAG did not receive a response to these questions. Dr. Manamela replied to the email to which the letter was attached on 26 November 2015. In doing so, she forwarded an email from the MEC. So Dr. Manamela forwarded an email from the MEC in which the MEC stated the following. And I quote what the MEC said. She says, "Hi, Doctors HOD Lebete Manamela. Please get out, please, I think she means please get our legal team to get involved in this process. HOD and Dr. Lebete, you have to drive this process, to provide leadership. These NGOs are dishonest," meaning the stakeholders that they were claiming to cooperate with. "Please treat this as urgent," exclamation mark. And she signs off her name. The response by the department to this paragraph in the founding affidavit, so their response in the answering affidavit, is as follows. In relation to the first paragraph that I read out, paragraph 43, in which all of the questions were posed by stakeholders and in which it was complained that no answers were forthcoming from the department, the answering affidavit responds to that paragraph in the following way. The answering affidavit is deposed to is it Dr. Lebete or Mr. Lebete?
Dr. Lebete.
Doctor.
Yes.
And it says the following. I reiterate, he says, I reiterate that there are statutory instruments to access information held by organs of state. Urgent applications are not suited for that purpose. Annexure CC7 raises a number of questions which do not call for an answer in these proceedings. But in fact, those were precisely the questions that were required to be answered, not just answered to the stakeholders, but those were the answers that you should have had in your possession as a project head. Answers to the questions about infrastructure, about the level of care at facilities and the ability to cope, about the time frame, and so on, medication and so on. So I find that startling, and it bears out for me that there wasn't an intention to cooperate. Why not provide the information? Why ask stakeholders to use their statutory instruments to access information? Is it not sufficient to write a letter?
I don't know how to respond because as the project manager, I think I was not part of this in terms of the answering affidavit. So this is the first time I read it here. So I'm not able to either justify or not justify the answers that they are giving you.
Sorry, Mr. Mosanoki, if you can turn to page 438 then of that same bundle.
Of the, which one?
Page 438, file 1.
File 1.
Yes. Have you found it?
Yes.
So at page 438 of the record is a confirmatory affidavit by yourself saying that you've read the affidavit of Lebete on behalf of the second respondent and confirmed the contents thereof to be true and correct insofar as they relate to the department or where it refers to me.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that you were involved in this and you confirmed the contents of the answering affidavit, not just in relation to you, not just in relation to the information there that pertained to you, but even the information as it pertained to the department.
You must understand that it's a long time. So many things have happened since that time. So I might not remember everything.
Are you, I think...
You can hear? Okay, I'm saying that these things have happened in 2016, long time ago, and 2015, 2016. So I'm not able to remember everything. So I need to be prodded sometimes to remember.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough.
But the overarching question, the overarching question that counsel is putting to you is the following. Despite warnings from a variety of stakeholders, including experts, including heads of psychiatry, and including, indeed, people who represented families of patients, your department was headstrong and very determined to go ahead with this project. Isn't that a fair comment?
I think it's fair.
It's fair, isn't it?
Yes.
You read what these doctors said, what the psychiatrists said, what these lawyers said, whatever their names, and what their family people might be saying. Look at you going to Randfontein, and the people were quite restless and unhappy. You knew all those things, and your department went ahead. Whatever the lawyers said, whatever the psychiatrists said, whatever the caregivers, specialist caregivers said, you chose to go ahead and you went ahead. Isn't that fair?
I agree, Justice, that we should have listened.
And because of that decision, many, many people died. By acting and ignoring all those warnings, it ended up with very vulnerable people, so-called stable chronic patients dying. Is it not so?
It's true.
Mr. Masanoki, my last question to you on this December 2015 litigation. On the eve of the hearing, a settlement agreement was entered into between the stakeholders and the department. And the terms of that agreement, are you familiar with the general terms of that agreement? To have a meaningful consultative process going forward?
Yes.
Do you recall that?
Yes.
That the parties agreed we were going to talk to each other, we will consult, and nothing will happen without making sure that that users will receive the same level of care that they are receiving at Life Esidimeni.
Yeah, in short, we agreed to work together.
Yes.
Yes.
Did that meaningful consultation take place in your view?
Initially, we tried to work together from both sides. That's why the stakeholder meetings was part of the arrangement, that we must continually meet together. and we did try to do that. But I think in the process, there were no meeting of heads between us and the stakeholders. Maybe the blunder is that we chaired the meeting, and there was a lot of tensions that came around that. And I think that's why the stakeholders decided to go again to court the second time. And after the second time, we never met again.
But the cutting end of the question is, did you, even after the first settlement, did you in fact consult before you distributed people around the province? Or you just went ahead on your own? Did you go back to them and say you were concerned about this? You went to court about this. We are about to put people on backs of trucks and take them wherever. What do you have to say about it? As our constitution requires a responsive government, we're required to be a responsive government to concerns of people over whom we have authority. Did you go back to them and say, we are going to do it? We've heard you, but we're going to do it. Whatever you think.
Your Honor, after the settlement that we will meet and work together, we continued to meet and discuss the issues and debated issues. I think what made the stakeholders pull out was the issue, the debate around the discharge issues. Before even the placement of patients, there was the issue of whether do we continue discharging people from life Esidimeni. And we tried to explain that the discharge has always been taking place. It's a regular discharge. It has nothing to do with the placement of...
Yeah, but you took the decision that whatever their views are, we're going to go ahead. Isn't it so? Whatever the settlement terms were, we're going to go ahead.
With the project?
Yes.
The project was, I think the settlement was not curtailing the project. That's why we needed to work with them to ensure that it
at the minimum, it required of you to do what? To consult stakeholders?
To work with the stakeholders to ensure that their concerns are taken care of.
I'm also asking the question because, as you say, the breakdown in trust then followed in early 2016. And that was exactly coincided with when your concerns were growing about the feasibility of the project. And yet there was the distrust I think I must clarify, it wasn't that the stakeholders pulled out. There was nothing to pull out from. As far as I understand, the stakeholders were requesting information and were being frustrated. But be that as it may, the constitutional obligation through Section 195 of the Constitution lay on the government to ensure that that questions were responded to and that people's needs were responded to and that there was transparency and accountability in the process. That's partly also why I'm asking this question, is that the breakdown in trust came at a time when you yourself had a growing concern about what was going to happen. I'm going to leave it there, unless you want to add anything to what I've said.
No, it's fine.
Then, very quickly, I'm going to wrap up soon. there are just two things. Maybe it's just one thing, and that is you said that the is it the Health Advanced Institute, the consultancy that you referred to?
Yes.
You said that they found that it was not cost effective. It wasn't cost saving to remain at Life Esidimeni, to continue with Life Esidimeni. But in fact, what the record shows is that, and that's at page 1394 of the record. There's a presentation. It's a duplication of a PowerPoint presentation.
Of what? Of Health Advance?
Well, the cover slide has two logos, the Gauteng Department of Health and HAI. Are you familiar with this presentation? It was a presentation by Y. Saba.
I think it was before I joined the project, but you can ask the question.
It's just to correct maybe your recollection, because in fact what it says is the following. In general, the service provided by Life Esidimeni is good value for money. And then it goes on to say that there's sufficient relevant information to obtain the to allow the department to make sound decisions in relation to Life Esidimeni. So I just want to correct that in fact HAI's own report, at least this presentation seems to be from them, says that it was good value for money. So then, let's just wrap it up. Would you agree that this was not a cost-saving measure, the project?
It has turned out to be very expensive, in my opinion.
So not only has it not been cost-saving, it's actually cost the department more than it was paying when it was with Life Esidimeni.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, at the moment it's very expensive. Because we have gone back to Life Esidimeni, they're charging even much more than the initially charging, in my opinion.
And you also went back to, do you go to other hospitals? Your first project that you did,
Yes.
did you go back to that same clinics group to ask them to take your patients back?
Yes, the department also did go back to Selby Park, which is a clinics group, to accommodate our mental health care users. They did go there back.
Why was it urgent? I know, Council, you're wrapping up. Why was it urgent for the department to save money? You know, departments run on a predictable basis. You budget ahead of time, isn't it?
Yes.
Your budgets are ahead of time. They're never retrospective. In other words, ordinarily you shouldn't be broke because you ought to have planned, this is what I'm going to spend, this is how much I'm going to spend on people who need mental health care, on cars, on blue lights, on holidays, on flights, on... You normally do this upfront, isn't it?
Yes, actually, even the Life Esidimeni places were budgeted.
Were budgeted upfront.
Yes.
Hence the question, what had happened that makes the shoe to pinch so hard as to sacrifice people in order to save money? What, do you know what it was? And why wasn't this money within the normal budgetary processes?
Your Honor, is a very difficult question to answer from my side, because in hindsight, it was not really that urgent.
So you don't know why, you say it wasn't urgent, which then... I'll leave it to you. Counsel, you go ahead.
Sorry, Justice Masaneke, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. I'm actually done. I have an answer which may be a complete answer. It was all irrational. It was mad. It was not necessary. It was not urgent. But we did it.
But that answer is an answer in the negative. It was not needed. It was not good idea. It was in. But
Yes.
what was it? In other words,
Yes.
it was. If it was, let
Please
me
go ahead
pose the
and
question to you like the
yes.
following. So we've established that it was not cost saving, right? We've established that. I'd like you to confirm that that you agree with me. We've established that the renovations could not have been done in time for the transfer.
Yeah, that's why I asked for extension.
We've also established that the patients, the mental health care users were sent to NGOs that were not appropriate.
Some of them, not all of them.
But you earlier agreed with me when I put to you that the task team that was set up to investigate all of the NGOs found that not a single one of them met the criteria.
What I said, and maybe just to clarify issues, is that the NGOs are taking care of many other patients outside the life Esidimeni, and they have been doing that all these years. So there are NGOs that are doing good service. But I agree that some of those NGOs were found to be wanting.
And so you have a different view from what you said earlier and from what the Ombudsman put to us, which is that none of them met the criteria.
The ones that were inspected by the Ombudsman. But there are, what I want you to understand is that there are many other NGOs that are delivering those services.
But the 27 NGOs that were part of this?
You are speaking of only the 27?
Absolutely, only this.
Okay.
Would you then agree with me that they were not appropriate? Meaning that they were not capable of rendering the services that were required for the residents?
I still insist not all of them, because there are those that they were continuing to deliver services. They just added additional patients.
They just added additional patients.
And beds which might have created problems for them.
Okay. So those NGOs, were they a minority? Most of them were appropriate? How would you put it? How many NGOs were good of the 27?
I won't have the number off the cuff, but the ones that I have seen that could be appropriate if they had the resources. The one that I visited is Anan in Vereeniging and Takalani in Deep Kloof and Bopilong in next to Kalafong. Those I visited, and if they had adequate resources, especially the funds, I think they were appropriate.
So, okay. Mr. Masanohi, I was hoping to wrap up, to actually end very soon, but now I'm afraid I have to say, Takalani was one of those NGOs that was good, you say, that you'd visited. You're just repeating what you just said.
That
right?
was good in terms of the facilities that were available, that I went to visit and so.
In his report, the Ombudsman says, I'm just going to read out what he says. He says 75, which is about 80% of the patients, died from 5 NGO complexes. One of them was Takalani.
Yes, I know. I'm saying that if the resources were available to them in time, the facilities still stands and still are being used.
Okay, then let me move on. So some were appropriate, Others were not appropriate, that you agree. Those that were appropriate were overwhelmed and overloaded by the department so that they actually then couldn't provide proper services. Is that correct?
Adequate services, yes.
That's actually a better word, adequate services. Would you agree also that some were licensed irregularly?
Maybe I need to explain in terms of the licensing. I think irregularly emanate from the issue of Dr. Manamela signing the SLAs instead of the HOD. I think that emanated from that because I think it was wrong from our side that we never really, that process, she inherited it as a mental health director. All the licensing was done by them. It was not from the HOD who was supposed to be signing that. I think that is the irregular part of it.
That you're saying that Dr. Manamela signed it when she should not have in law. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the process that was inherited by the previous, it has always been done that Dr. Manamela, the director of mental health services was the signing person. So it was never rectified. It's wrong from the department point of view because
so it was wrong.
It was never rectified.
It was wrong. It was wrong. It might have been going on for some time, but it was wrong. You agree with that?
Some time, even for all the other NGOs, I think. Yeah. So it was something that I think it was erroneous.
But apart from that irregularity of who should sign the certificate, would you agree that licenses were provided to NGOs when they should not have been provided licenses?
In that respect, I will accede.
And do you agree that and you have said, and I'm just confirming, and I'd like you to confirm as well, whether that subsidies were not paid to NGOs?
I think so. I might not be right for other NGOs, but in most cases, it was raised as a question, as a response. I might not be right, I might be right, but I think that was the idea why other people were not, especially the new ones, because they didn't have anything in their till to take care of patients.
You are agreeing that subsidies were not paid?
On time.
On time?
Yes.
And can you confirm that some NGOs had to go to court in order to get their subsidies?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of that?
Yes.
But you did say that there were issues, and including that some NGOs didn't have bank accounts.
Yes. They had to have bank accounts for you to be able to transfer.
I would hope they'd have to have bank accounts. That in itself is a first clue that maybe they're not able to do the service. You say that there was an open advertisement and there was this open process. I would have thought that the selection of the NGOs through that advertisement process would have made sure that they at least have a bank account to do business with.
Yes. I think it was befuddled, it was muddled up by the timelines, I think.
So in addition to that, you were aware that the result of the termination of the contract was that at least 700 workers would lose their jobs. And I must just qualify that because you referred to 700 healthcare workers.
Yes.
So what was the number in total?
The number in total will be much more because I don't have the figures here, but there were contract people, the outsourced part of the facility. The catering was outsourced. the gardening was outsourced and the security were outsourced. So basically, it meant that even those contracts were going to be terminated. So it means more additional people were going to be affected.
More than 700. The 700
Yes.
were healthcare workers, but
Yeah.
other affected workers would be
Affected.
catering staff, gardeners,
Yeah.
security guards, and the like.
Why didn't you care about that? Why wasn't that an important consideration for the state? That not only will people be strewn around NGOs, but that so many jobs would be lost. Why wasn't that a deep source of concern in a country with such high levels of unemployment?
Your Honor, for me, it was a big concern. It was a big pain for me. To have, that's why I tried my best to ensure that HR task team was formed to assist with making sure that we absorb people that who are able to be absorbed. And I did try my best, but
For costs
it
that
was
you-
a very difficult thing.
Yes.
It made me to have sleepless nights because it was a concern to me, especially when it comes to the category of what we call care workers, people who are not really qualified, and it was going to be difficult for us to take them.
Did your HOD and the MEC were they not concerned about this near calamity? You close an institution down. An institution is made of people. You might not like life as Esidimeni, but hell, the
Yes.
trained health workers and other people, their livelihood came from there. And I've seen the letter of the MEC write and say, I'm terminating the contract. That all of you have to run like headless chickens to move people in all directions. Why did you people do that? What is the justification in law, let alone in human dignity, for doing that?
I did try my best to alleviate that pressure, but my best was not enough.
Do you know of any justification why? I mean, you see, it boggles the mind. I sit here and I know what our Constitution says. I know what the law says. Mental Health Care Act, it is cited in many ways by the Ombuds, and has been breached in many ways. To boot it all, well over 1,000 jobs get lost. Only for people to die and for the department to go straight back to Esidimeni and ask the patients to be taken back. Is there any explanation that's acceptable to our nation, to ourselves, why this happened?
There's no suitable explanation, in my opinion. I can't justify it.
Are you done?
You're going to... I'm still here.
I'm now closing. I just want to confirm that you'd agree that these patients were in the care of the state.
Yes.
Would you agree with the statement then that about 1,700, 1,800, it depends on when you pick your timeline, people, vulnerable mental health care users who were receiving long-term care were then forcibly moved in a manner and to places that were inadequate and in a manner that jeopardized their health and well-being and life.
It did contribute to the endangering their lives. Moving them did contribute.
I have no further questions, Justice.
Thank you. Re Mosinogi, Counsel, I can see your mic is on. Please do speak.
Well, I just wanted to raise an issue that has been brought to our attention in terms of the terms of reference. Public statements were supposed to be done with liaison with other parties, and we have become aware that there's been a number of public statements which are being made in relation to these proceedings, and in particular, clause or paragraph 6.10 provides that the parties will provide one another reasonable notice of the content of any public statement relating to the ADR process prior to the making of such statement. But since yesterday, there's been quite a number of statements in different type of media, which we have not been consulted. So if we can just get a clarity and direction in that.
Can I make a suggestion that we meet tomorrow at 9 o'clock in chambers and deal with the matter? And if you want to make a public declaration thereafter, you're more than welcome.
Thank you, Justice.
But it's a matter which typically is a dispute between the parties, right? It's a difference between the parties about conduct. I'm happy to air it now publicly, but ordinarily it's a matter that conveniently can be dealt with tomorrow. But if you feel strongly that you want to do it publicly, obviously, or let it be discussed and then you can come and put it on record tomorrow morning. Is that suitable?
Well, we have no difficulties to resolve this aspect tomorrow morning. If the terms of the, if the condition in the terms of reference can be maintained as it is, pending such resolution, no difficulties.
You need an interim order interdicting the other sides from, sure, that's not unreasonable. I mean, given the provisions in the agreement, again, starting with section 27. We can discuss the matter now. Alternatively, we can reserve it to discuss in chambers tomorrow. But I don't think we should look at the terms of our agreement and live by those terms. I don't say they've been breached, but there's a complaint that they have been breached. In the face of the complaint, I don't think we should have press releases between now until we discuss the matter.
I'm comfortable to advise my clients of that and to get an undertaking that there won't be press releases. The one thing I will say is that these proceedings have garnered significant media attention, and we have no control of that. But I can give you an undertaking that my clients won't issue any press statements.
Legal Aid South Africa?
We're hoping to discuss it tomorrow morning, and we won't issue
You won't
any
issue statements in the meantime?
We have no problem with the suggestions made, that there should be an interim undertaking by Section 27 until the matter is resolved tomorrow.
Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. I will have a discussion with my clients and I will give them the instruction not to issue any statements. I don't know anything like that has been done, but we can discuss it tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that suitable, Counsel? Is that
Aid is in order,
between now until then? Of course, it is an important question to the extent that we have to remember that we are partners in resolving this matter. Yesterday I referred to the state as partners in this. So are the families. They've set up committees, they have consulted with the state, they have entered into agreements, and that's how we came to where we are. So it's very important we keep the ambiance right without losing the ability to get to the truth. But we're not, at this stage, I would hope we're not opposite sides. We're trying to do precisely the same thing. Get to the truth, get equitable redress, and so the spirit must be kept going all the time. And thank you for raising that. You'll still be, I've just used one of the official languages of this country. So we will continue with the examination tomorrow, and please be here at 9:30 tomorrow. We start at 9:30.
Justice, will I be able to make I wanted to it's not, I thought we were finished today because I wanted to make a closing
statement.
or remark. Yes.
Yes, sir. We're going to invite you to do so certainly tomorrow.
Yes.
Your evidence, you're still under oath, you're still under cross-examination.
Yes.
So at the end of your cross-examination tomorrow, certainly, it will be most welcome to make a closing statement. And I'll certainly give you that opportunity to do so.
Okay.
So just to give you an idea of what's going to happen tomorrow, you're going to be asked questions by Advocate Groenewald, after which you're going to be asked questions by Advocate Krause, questions by Advocate Nkuchana, and then a re-examination by the advocate who started with you from the state. So it's going to be a little bit of work still to be done tomorrow. We'll probably finish around 1 o'clock, but I ask you to be here not later than 9:30. Council, we meet at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning in my chambers. We shall adjourn now.
Yo.